streaming. There we go. Hello and welcome to With Thunderous Applause. I am Zach.
And I am Steve.
We are
With Thunderous Applause is a podcast where two friends with sometimes differing opinions discuss current events and specifically ideas. We're ideas people.
We're just two white guys about to talk about reproductive issues.
Well, today the current event is, of course, I don't know, a leak that perhaps the Supreme Court is considering overturning Roe v. Wade. So that's what we're going to talk about today. It's also Mother's Day, and I have not yet talked to my mother. Let's check in. Have you talked to yours?
Oh, I have totally not talked to my mother at all in a very long time. I think she's still good. Yeah. No, I don't regularly talk to her. I don't dislike her or anything like that. Just
fucking postcard holidays and shit. You don't call her?
No, typically not. I will give her a call on like maybe Christmas.
Random third Tuesday or something.
Like sometimes I'll just be like, I had a question about something that I think you might know something about. When she's useful to me, I'm sure she'll love to hear that.
Jesus
Mom,
Christ, dude.
Don't watch this.
Jesus Christ. Well, I attempted to call my mother, but I don't know. I also talked to my sister, and she said she saw on the website that the convoy is headed back to Washington, D.C.
I heard about it. I haven't heard too much about
it,
which is probably a good
stop
thing.
Antifa from protesting or whatever. I don't fucking know what kind of batshit crazy shit they're into these days.
For me, just the fact that I haven't heard much about it is probably a good sign. That means it's not doing very much or very well, and that's a good thing for most of us. I think the last thing I heard was them trying to go to Oakland, and people were like, "Get the fuck out of our town."
Oh yeah, I hadn't heard that. But there's various kind of splinter movements. It's kind of like the yellow vest thing. It's just like there's all sorts of different flavors to like the general thing. But either way, I have not yet talked to my mother. I left her voicemail. The way I figure it is like tempted to call the house, left voicemail. Tempted to call your cell phone, left voicemail. My obligation's done, my friend. Like, I'm not going to keep calling you. Like, if you don't answer your fucking phone, that's on you.
Fair enough. You're a little bit out of focus. I don't know what's up with that.
Interesting.
It's okay. So yeah, basically, the check-in, aside from talking to Mom, went and saw a movie today at a theater. It was cool. It's been a while.
Yeah, and you went and saw a Marvel movie.
I did. The other one was the Everything Everywhere All at Once. But like, it's almost to the point where it's going to be released on, what are we on? Blu-ray, and then I can just watch it on whatever streaming service it happens to be on.
Yeah. What, Marvel? That's on Disney, bro.
No. The Everything Everywhere All at Once. Is that a Marvel one?
Oh, I have no idea. I thought you were talking about.
No. Doctor Strange is going to be quite some time, I think. Yeah, but okay. I enjoyed it. I like the fact that it was many more like periods of story with very little in the way of action, and the action kind of like made sense, like it was necessary to put the story forward, as opposed to a lot of the recent Marvel movies where it's all action. So I was pretty happy with it.
Yeah. I saw like part of the first Doctor Strange, and it's not a character. Like, I was never into fucking comic books. I just wasn't.
I like the X-Men.
Yeah. Actually, if we had comic books, it was either Spider-Man or the X-Men. And usually we weren't collectors, so we'd have like a single issue that we like begged my mom for. The grocery stores used to have like fucking like a newsstand. Yeah.
I tried collecting, but it's so hard. Like,
it's fucking expensive, bro.
Especially when you're a kid. Yeah.
And you got no job.
Even back then, it was like $2.95 an issue in the 90s. So it was like, that is a ridiculous amount of money. Like, how many dicks? I mean, how many yards I got to mow for that money right there?
Right. Yeah. No, and you know, that's kind of how I felt about Magic. Like, I really liked playing Magic the Gathering, and I still like the game. I was never ever going to be competitive. Like, I placed top 3 in several tournaments, but like not like convention tournaments, just like, you know, at the local game store or whatever.
Yeah, like sealed deck and booster drafts.
I did okay, but like then you go into like free play where people are coming in with their built decks. Like I played the open pack or whatever you call it, the when you open the packs and play
booster draft.
Or draft. Yeah, draft. Because then generally like, okay, cool, I could read up on the rules, blah blah blah, and be prepared and go in and be like, oh shit, this is what I got. How do I put it together to do something?
Right.
And I did well in those, but if it was like come with your own cards, people are like, I was like, God damn, bro, that fucking Planeswalker is like a $60 card. Like, how the fuck do you have 4 of those in your deck? Like,
money, pure money. I've been selling mine off. Yeah. I was reading. I was selling mine off, and I was like, oh, I got these gold bordered ones from the World Championship decks, and I was like, oh, you know, that's cool. And I read up on it, and they're like, oh, they're not tournament legal. And I was like, well, why aren't they tournament legal? And it's like, well, they're not the real card. And I'm like, it's printed on the same cardboard with the same ink. Like, why is it not real? And it's like, well, because it's not from the set. And then you look into it, and people are very elitist about it. They're like, oh, well, you didn't, like, if you want to, you know, pay for the card, I can understand it. Otherwise, you know, you might as well just write the name of the card and the rules on a sheet of paper and stick it in your deck. And I'm like, this is the elitist shit, you know, that got me to like not want to play it except as booster draft and sealed deck. And then I liked your idea where you said you had a friend who like sold off all the cards at the end of the tournament. I'm just like, yep, that's the only way I could do it anymore, is just play once, sell it all off for, you know, like $10 or whatever, and then come back for the next one, hopefully.
Yeah, I could see it being pretty fun doing a kind of draft thing where like everybody like because you can usually find like, I don't know, now with inflation and shit, you used to be able to get like 4 boxes for $300 or 4 boxes for
about right, yeah,
$320 or something like that. Everybody pitches $100, and then you have 4 fucking cases to draw from, and you can just draft all day, drink beer and shit, and play with your friends rather than like, you know, going to a store and playing in a tournament. But either way, comic books like Magic the Gathering really very just expensive. Too expensive to be into. So
now they sell them as a subscription service. You can get, you know, subscription to all the Marvel ones and just read to your heart's content and never have to worry about, you know, actually having a bunch of comics that are collecting dust.
Oh, it's just like on an e-reader.
Yeah.
I find that fucking, I don't know, kind of, you know, whatever. It is what it is, right? That's just the way the medium has gone. Like, people don't want paper books, like, but you know, part of having it is a physical copy of it. And now it's just like, okay, cool. You can just like, you pay $10 a month and you have access to a whole catalog and you can read, you know, as much as you want. But you know, it ties back to that concept we were talking about, that how the World Bank or whatever like did that really kind of like tone deaf bullshit where they're like, you know, you will own nothing and be happy. Like, basically that's what it is. Technically you never own it. Like, they can just, if you piss them off or if they find you doing something like trying to copy it and give it to other people that aren't subscribed, they just fucking cut you off completely. You have no ownership over it. You just have like you're renting it. That's what you're doing. You're renting. Same with textbooks and shit. You can do that, and I generally do because I don't want to keep the textbook in most cases. Like,
right.
I'm okay with renting that. That seems to be better. The problem is that like I could find a used copy of the previous edition of this shit for like $8 or $10 and have a physical copy, or I can give you like 85% of the goddamn fucking retail price just to fucking read it for like 2 months.
Yeah.
And at that point it's digital, so like it doesn't cost them anything to make more copies.
No, exactly. And it completely ignores like paper. Even when you break it down, like, paper isn't all that expensive, and so most of the cost of a textbook is the time of the person who wrote the textbook.
Yeah.
And so like that does explain why it's not just like free textbooks.
Yeah. Textbooks are a fucking racket.
They are. They really are.
But so we're going to talk about this leak and the potential overturn of Roe v. Wade and what that means. And so we wanted to, in our introduction, qualify ourselves to have that discussion by talking about like comic books and Magic the Gathering, so that you know that abortion rights are our number one priority.
Yes. 2 white guys who probably never got laid talking about comic books and Magic the Gathering. Totally qualified to talk about this. But more to the point, though. What was that?
I said never got laid. Yeah, right, fucking dude.
Took me a while. Shut up. More to the point, though, what I noticed and was happy to see is that people were making the connection in between the idea that recently there have been employers and corporations that have been having a hard time getting workers, and suddenly you got a big focus on making more kids, more workers. And so, to me, I've been noticing the trend and saying, like, if you want to protest capitalism, you need to just stop having children, stop providing, bodies for the grinder. And so for me, it's good to see other people also coming to the same conclusion.
Yeah, I hear you. And it's true too, because like, and it ties into a lot of our conversations about like energy and stuff, because like, and I think we might have had this discussion offline or something, but basically, like, in history textbooks, it's like, oh, and then the moral union went and fought the South to end slavery because we all love black people. And it's like, no, fossil fuels replaced the need for slave labor. And in the context of like the wage labor system in industrial capitalism, like it was much cheaper to make them a sharecropper, collect rent from the land, and then sell them all the means to survive than it was to maintain them as chattel. Because the system of fucking slavery didn't end.
Yeah.
Like any wage worker is essentially, especially low wage workers, essentially don't have agency, right? Like it's not a far stretch. Now, I'm not saying it's as bad as chattel slavery. Like that shit was fucked up. But ask people in the fucking South right now, like, how much better are you off now than you were before? And they might be like, I'm glad I'm not a fucking slave, but I still feel like one, right? Like,
I don't get whipped physically, but I get whipped emotionally.
I know, right? Constantly. I mean, and still they get whipped. I mean, that's what the fucking cops murdering fucking black and brown people is, right? Like,
now they just use sticks.
It's just enforcing the racial order in the class system, right? Like, anyway, what I was getting at is that, like, through human history, and I always like, that's my thing, is I just like always strive to go deeper into history and to find out human behavior, because like we often forget, or we just kind of have these blinders on that like the world started in like modern Euro-American history,
right.
And we lose perspective of like we've been a species in organized human settlements for fucking tens of thousands of years.
Right.
And we've had cities and civilizations for at least like 8 or 10,000 years, right? And so if you look, taking that long view of history, like human labor under slave conditions basically built society, and that's still true today. And so I agree with you, as fossil fuels are depleted, as there's all of this kind of instability in the capitalist system. Human labor is going to be more important because access to fossil fuel resources and other technologies to do work are going to become more and more scarce. So I think there's a grain of truth to what you're saying, or it kind of encapsulates like reality in a really kind of subtle subconscious way.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the videos we have,
put babies to work.
make babies for wage slavery. No, and that's really, for me, something that I've been thinking about for a very long time. And like I said, I'm happy that other people are now thinking about it, and it's getting more mainstream recognition. Mainstream equals Reddit for me.
It's true,
but basically getting more recognition from other people. It's just nice to have ideas validated, of course. Our first video is actually by Timothy Ward. If you recall,
revisiting Timothy Ward.
We watched one of his videos for our Great Resignation video. He basically spoke about how he didn't want to work for other people, doing shit he didn't want to do if he didn't have to, and gave some reasons why. And he's back, and he wants to talk about why it is that he doesn't feel like having children unnecessarily and against his will. So.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day, and we're sticking with the male-centric view of everything.
Our views are valid, man. I did that whole bullshit. Like you can't talk about this issue because it's not your lived experience, as if lived experience is like the only thing that informs someone's opinion on something.
Right.
I could tell you, my mother, if she's headed to DC with the fucking convoy, they're going there to protest against abortion. Like, she's a woman, so is her perspective more valid than mine? Like, does she approach it with knowledge? Does she read books? Does she get different perspectives? Does she read theory and incorporate it and understand things? Like, our job as the underclass is to produce laborers to accumulate wealth for the fucking ruling class. Like, does she think in those terms? No, she fucking doesn't. She says, "Oh, babies are precious and
babies
God's gift." It's like, are they God's gift? Because, like, I know people that fucking felt that way and carried fucking babies to term when the doctor told them, like, after 3 months the thing wouldn't survive outside the womb. Like, and if that's their fucking choice to make, dude, but like, I wouldn't make that choice, and I can say that with confidence. And I would hope I probably wouldn't stay with someone who did make that choice.
I would think that's if anything, that's God telling you, like, maybe just give up on this one.
Yeah, God,
you could do more later on. Try later.
But God can work miracles.
Well, he didn't.
Well, yeah,
clearly.
Yeah, we're talking about abortion today, or not religion. Wait. Is that possible? I don't know.
They might be.
Timothy Ward. Let's see what he has
Timothy
to say.
Ward.
To me, it is not selfish to say I want to live my life without having to take care of another human, little baby human. I work hard for my money. I want to keep all of it. I work hard to have the free time I have. I want to use it the way I want to use it. I don't really want to have my life linked to a child as well as another human being my whole life. Whole rest of my life. Not only is there a kid, then you got your baby mama. I live a pretty carefree, kind of introverted life. I'm not ready for that type of link. And I don't think it's selfish. Actually, let me take that back. Let me rephrase that. I'll say, I think it's selfish in that I'm looking out for myself first, but I don't think that's a problem. We do a lot of things in life that are selfish. Selfish is not always a bad thing. Overly selfish, okay. But me making decisions about my life is supposed to be selfish, right? It's supposed to be selfish. It's me making decisions about me. And it's a decision that's not harming anyone else. When you make decisions about your life that harm or hurt other people, well, yeah, those are overly selfish. That's the bad type of selfish. I'm making a decision about my life that does not harm anyone else. No one is getting hurt when I say I don't want to have kids. Actually, there'd probably be a lot more pain, suffering, and heartache if I decided to have kids. I don't know why people out here acting like everyone who has kids, it just turns into this magical experience, when yet and still there's kids with parents out here who horrible things happen. There's kids with one parent, horrible things happen. They always have that void for the one parent. There's kids out here with no parents. There's all this bad stuff that's happening to young people, to kids, to children. But yet and still, we still out here just recycling these beliefs that who even knows where they came from. That says you have to get married, you have to have kids, all this stuff. When someone stands up and says, you know what, I don't think I want to do that. People are so programmed, people are so brainwashed, they can't accept that. A lot of times I think it's, people who have kids and they have to struggle every day with them kids. They don't want to see you out here, someone like me, just living my best life without having to worry about kids. So they fabricate these, it's selfish, it's wrong. God says you have to have kids. That's another one. They love that one. God said you have to multiply and fill the earth. I feel like he was speaking to humanity. And humanity's doing that. There's 8 billion people. There wasn't near that many when that scripture was written.
We're doing a good job. You know,
there weren't that many when the scripture was written. We're doing a good job. Yeah, and that's back to religion. Bam. Go ahead.
Damn. Yeah, it's inevitable, bro. Because it's a moral question, right? So there's two things that I wanted to address in that, and the first one's probably easier to tackle. And I feel like I'm pretty articulate tonight, which is weird because I'm exhausted and I had like half a joint I didn't finish smoking last night, and so like I was like, it's a nice day. I'm just like grading papers and doing other work shit. It's like I'm gonna get stoned. And so I don't know. I'm surprised. My mind is sharp as it is. So the first thing was him being like, oh, it's okay to be selfish. I don't call that selfishness.
No,
it is as much. It's not about, I mean, yes, in a roundabout way, he's thinking about himself, but like that's agency, right? Like,
well, he's also thinking about the child that he's choosing not to have. Go on though.
Yeah. Well, that's true too, right? Like, but even when he's like, well, yeah, it's selfish. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
That's just agency. I wouldn't be like, oh, you're selfish because you don't want to have kids. It's like, no, you as a human being have a right to make decisions about your future. And if you've assessed the information, as he said, well, then you got the fucking baby's mama too. And like all that other shit, which is like, we had breakfast with baby mama this morning. Like, and wonderful human being, all that other stuff. But forever, I will have to seek her counsel on things, even though we are no longer romantically involved, right? Like, so there is that, like, kind of like, these are ties that last forever. Like, having kids is a permanent fucking thing, and having a reservation about that is not selfish. It's just asserting your agency in the situation. So that's point one. Go ahead, respond.
Please go on with point two. I don't mind.
Okay, I was just making sure I wasn't too blabbing.
No. It's totally fine. I get what he's saying. I get where he's coming from, and I would say that it's totally not selfish. What he's saying though is like he's saying, I'm not the greatest person to do this job. Like, I recognize my own shortcomings. He didn't come out and say it directly, but I mean, he's basically admitting his own shortcomings, that he might not be the best person for that job. And so if he were to bring a child into the world, he might not be the right person to raise that child. And that person might not turn out to be a good citizen. And that's ultimately what society is about, is crafting good citizens and, or people that are okay for the world.
Yeah, I didn't really get that out of that. I just kind of felt like he had made a decision that he was happy being single and not having kids or being able to do the things he wanted to do and didn't want to muck that shit up. And I 100% agree with that. And even then, like, there's, of course, every parent has anxiety. And then the religion thing and the go be fruitful and multiply thing, that, and the 8 billion people on the planet, sure, like, but what I think he missed, and this was my second point, was he's just kind of like, I don't understand it. It must be religion. Like, yeah, of course, there's a social infrastructure, right? Like ideas that are imparted to us by the dominant culture in a million different fucking ways, like subconscious ways. Not just advertising, but everything from like something an uncle says at a Christmas party or whatever. Like all of those ideas become like our worldview, right? Like, but the sense is like part of that is rooted in like biology. Like we're organisms, like we have to reproduce. You as a human, like you as an individual organism do not need to reproduce. And in fact, there's a lot of animals where like most of the young males like will go most of their life without reproducing, and if they're lucky, they might be able to slip in from time to time. And there's all sorts of reasons that might be. Part of it might be to maintain genetic diversity, is by having basically like a bunch of young males like that are moving across a larger territory and occasionally succeeding in getting their genetics in.
The sneaky male.
Right. But also like a fitness thing, like fitness is defined by your ability to reproduce. Essentially, it's not like, oh, I can win a fight with you. It's like, well, the winning the fight though is part of reproducing, right? Like,
well, not
for
only
many
that,
species.
but like, you know, for certain species, it's like, oh, I wait until he reproduces and he's tired, and I go and I sneak in and I get one of the other females.
Exactly. Yeah, and so like,
so there's various ways to be fit.
Right. Yeah. Ultimately, fitness is about reproduction, though. So, like, if you're not strong enough to survive, then you don't get to reproduce, or you don't get to reproduce a lot. Right. And so organisms are driven to reproduce, and the only thing that's supposed to keep them in check is carrying capacity. Right. And carrying capacity fluctuates over time. Right. Like, environmental change, even annual variation across years. Like, one year might be really wet and the next year might be dry, and so, you know, depending on how all that, it depends on how you reproduce and how successful you are. But that, I guess, was the point I was making, is that like he kind of glossed over the fact that like we're organisms, and we actually do have a drive. It's not all social programming. Like, we also have, like, literally, it's in our, like, we are an organism like any other organism. Like, reproduction is literally like what we are built to do. So
he does he does talk about it in other parts. In fact, he has a thing where he talks he talks about like, you know, his family name, and he's like, well, that's the thing, is like, okay, my family name dies, but the bloodline's still going. I got sisters, they're having kids, so on and so forth. He's like, you know, I don't necessarily need to worry about that aspect of it. And even if I did, it's not your place to tell me what I have to do.
Well, and yeah, and I agree 100% with that, especially, you know, having, you know, my ex-wife kept her maiden name. My daughters like have my name, but like beyond that, like my sister took her husband's name, but I don't agree with that practice at all. Because like that's like a legacy of fucking ownership, dude. So that's just like, that is a ritual of a patriarchal society. Bam. I just qualified myself to talk about this issue in that sentence.
Not only that, but I have an uncle. He was the only boy out of 6 children, and he had one daughter, and that was it. And then somehow it got stuck in his head that like, oh no, the family name is going to die. I need to have a boy. And he failed twice before he finally succeeded. So there's 2 girls that shouldn't even exist. They basically only are now in existence because he failed to have a boy on the second attempt. Like, that's literally the only reason they exist right now.
And and I don't understand that have a boy and have a girl thing also. Like, the need, I'm like so fucking happy with my 2 daughters. Like, if I had a son,
they're great.
I would not say I'd hate it, but like, my friends that have boys are like, only like single boys, like just like an only child kind of thing. Like, like my girls are pretty fucking high energy. Like, Pete is the younger, especially. She seems to be kind of more of like a tactile movement person.
Oh, nice. She was always kind of reserved, you know, when I knew her. So it's good to know that she's like, getting out there.
Yeah, young, and I think she couldn't speak English very well, so like, or speak very well, so like, it's harder to communicate. It's you're kind of like reserved and stuff because you don't know how to respond to someone. But anyway, she's the bouncy one. She's the one with the energy. And if I had a boy, I like watch these people and be like, dude, like, I would not tolerate that shit. Like, I'm trying to do something and all you hear is banging as they fucking run around and throw shit, and they're climbing and jumping, and like, well, calm the fuck down, dude. Like, I would not enjoy that at all. I'm happy to have 2 daughters. And like, you know, everybody says, oh, you're naive. As soon as they're teenagers, they're going to be raging cunts. And I'm like, I hope not to be. I'm fucking chill with that.
Got a teenage daughter right now, and like, her worst thing is that she's disrespectful. Okay, so what the fuck? Like, she was literally raised to question authority, not by me, but she was basically raised to question authority, and I can appreciate that. And so she's just like, why should I shower? Why should I do this? And I'm like, well, you should shower because it's hygienic and you don't want to get diseases. But I get where you're coming from. I get where you're coming from. You know. But like, you know, it's good that she questions authority, because authority, you know, like, you get you working a 9-to-5 shit job, you know, and you never question it.
And grinding and paying 22% on a fucking new car you don't need.
Exactly.
Yeah, dude. So like, agreed. Like, and that's kind of like, mostly with Pete, she is a bit more high energy, but like she's also very defiant, and she's only fucking 6. People are like, "You're naive." It's like, I'm chill, Dad. Like, you're like, I'm gonna be there when they need me emotionally, and if they don't need me, guess what? I got other shit to do.
Well, if they don't,
I don't need
you
to
did
put
a good
myself
job
to be there. Go ahead.
Oh, if they don't need you, you did the good job. Then
That's
that
right.
just like goes to show how well you've done.
That's right.
He didn't talk about it. I think I cut it out. I think this is from an earlier or a clip I was trying to do. But he basically like talks about how, you know, people try to talk you into having kids. And I think I cut it early. And he's like, you know, and, you know, when they're very forceful, you know, he's like, I can't respect that. You know, when they're just like, oh, you know, like, you know, here's what you're missing. And, you know, it's cool. And he's like, you know, I can respect that. And it just made me think, you know, coming from my world, it's all about how when someone buys like a computer and they get certain parts and they're like, oh, well, this is what I bought and this is what I'm stuck with. So now I have to convince everyone else that, you know, this is good. And, you know, this, and, you know, this is the best sort of thing, you know, and it's basically to convince themselves that they didn't make the wrong decision.
Yeah, no, he cut out in that clip that we just watched. He kind of said it towards the end. He's like, and I'm pretty sure that part of the reason they're pressuring me is it's like, well, I have to do it, so why don't you?
Yeah.
And it's basically rooted in jealousy. And like, I don't necessarily agree with that either. Like, I have dude, I'm like, it's funny. I was going to be the big fuck up that was probably in jail and like always running through a million fucking women, never having a family, whatever.
I never figured you were going to have kids.
Yeah, precisely. Most people. And guess what? Out of like, I have some cousins that have kids, but like.
What about all the college guys? Freaking Adam and Fegus and all that.
They all have fucking kids. I was supposed to go camping with them, but speaking of like raising children to defy authority, there was a conversation that was had that essentially they're not sure if like me and my kids are going to corrupt their kids, but you can come camping as long as you don't corrupt my kids. And it's like, fuck you. I don't need you. Yeah, you're not in my life anymore. That was the last straw, dude. I maintained those relationships for 20 fucking years. Yeah. And it's like, you're concerned that I'm going to come on a camping trip with your family and that your kids are going to see something in me or my kids that you don't want them to see. Yeah, you're probably definitely a lot closer to that fascist side of the political spectrum than I'm comfortable with. Yeah, because if you're like controlling that closely, like what your children are exposed to, they go to public school, dude. Your daughter's probably going to be given fucking HJs in the back of the bus by 7th grade because that's what fucking kids do. Like, you can't fucking stop that shit. The best thing you can do is equip them to be critical thinkers, to challenge authority, and to be kind and gentle. And that's all you can fucking do.
You don't want to tug too hard. You got to give a gentle HJ.
No, we're not talking about that. That's fucking not okay. But I'm just saying you need to teach them to be kind and gentle in the sense of like be good to other people. Right? Like when you see the unhoused person, like, you know, fucking struggling or whatever, look them in the face and ask them how their day is going. Ask if you can help them. That's what I'm saying. And challenge them to question the system that creates that. Right?
Absolutely.
Like, and that's the best thing we can do for our kids. They're like, oh, well, what if you go for a third beer and they see you drinking a third beer? They're going to like,
was that a serious question that came up?
Something like that. And they're just like, God. Oh, you won't be able to like not like just get high and drunk the whole time. It's like, motherfucker, first of all, I haven't really seen either of you in like 10 years. And like, I have fucking kids myself.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of, you just like are probably like, oh, his kids probably sleep on a mattress without sheets and they probably eat soup from like, who the fuck do you think I am?
Yeah.
Like, fucking go fuck yourself. I'm fucking done, dude.
I mean, it doesn't
20 fucking years, 20 goddamn, no longer, dude. What, how old am I? I'm almost 40.
You're old, man. You're old.
Like, with one of them, it's almost 30 years, dude. Like 20 years or something. We've been friends. Yeah. Like, nah, man, we done. Hey, we got another clip, man. Let's watch it.
We do. This one's going to be about antinatalism, which has varying degrees of anti. Here we go.
Let's do it.
The Buddhist idea of enlightenment, a state in which suffering ceases, includes escaping the cycle of rebirth. Nirvana, the ultimate freedom from suffering, means that we're not born again in this painful existence, also called samsara. And so, Buddhism seems to follow anti-natalist logic, that there is no suffering in non-existence. So, non-existence, or the escape from the cycle of rebirth, is preferable to existence, which is inherently painful. To many, never coming into existence again may sound like a tragedy rather than liberation. If we don't exist, we'll never experience, for example, the joys of watching beautiful sceneries or being in love. Why would we prefer nothingness over an opportunity to relish the pleasure and beauty of being alive? In our consumerist culture, we celebrate the ongoing search for gratifying our desires, as it's something to be enjoyed and makes life worth living. Isn't it fantastic to be alive, so we can enjoy traveling, partying, restaurants, art, and having fun between the sheets? In reality, most, if not all things consumerism promotes are ways to cope with life's dissatisfaction. According to Schopenhauer's view, the things we seem to enjoy aren't the things we look for in themselves. Pleasure in itself isn't a positive experience, but a negative experience. Pain, on the other hand, isn't a negative experience, but a positive experience. As Schopenhauer stated, and I quote, "It is the good which is negative." In other words, happiness and satisfaction always implies some desire fulfilled, some state of pain brought to an end. So we're not so much after pleasure, we're after getting rid of pain. Then we could say that the attainment of pleasure is a means of ending pain. Interestingly enough, we find a similar view among Buddhist scholars. The Buddhist monk Ajahn Sona tells about a simile that compares having desire with being in debt. If we pay off our debts, we feel relief, but if we don't, we experience a sense of unease or dissatisfaction. It's painful and needs something to be alleviated. For example, the thirst for beer requires beer to be clenched. The desire to be a millionaire requires a certain amount of money to be fulfilled. Suppose we experience many desires, but are deprived of the corresponding pleasures. In that case, life becomes unbearable, as we find ourselves in a perpetual state of burning pain, without any means to douse the fire. However, if we don't have desires, pleasure becomes obsolete. An anti-natalist argument would be that the surest way not to experience the dissatisfaction, unease, and pain of all these desires that come with existence is to not exist in the first place. If we don't start a fire, we don't have to put it out. Buddhists call the ongoing suffering, or rather dissatisfaction of life, dukkha. Again, reaching nirvana relieves one from dukkha and liberates one from the cycle of rebirth. For an antinatalist, it's pretty encouraging to see that within one of the major world religions, the highest attainable achievement is never to be born again.
You thought it wasn't going to be about religion.
Well, I mean, there you go. But I mean, it's just kind of funny because, like, I had never heard that quite that way before, where it's basically like the best way to have pleasure is to never exist. Like, I was like, antinatal, that sounds like fucking nihilism right there. It's like, well, liberation is in death, you know?
Nihilism just implies like a not caring about existence. Antinatalism is never to have existed at all. And Timothy covers that in a different part of this video where he talks about, like, you know, if, you know, like, oh, well, you know, what if you don't carry on your family name, you know, like, you know, then, you know, it's just going to die out. And it's like, yeah, and if I'd never been born, it wouldn't have got carried on either. I would have just had, you know, or just would have been a couple of sisters.
Right. So he's like, well, why is it my burden? I didn't
exactly.
I didn't ask for this shit.
Exactly. And that's actually one of the fundamental principles of antinatalism is like, I didn't ask to be born. And it has flaws. But, you know, it basically, you know, states like, why should we have the right to bring children into the world without their permission? But then fundamentally, you can't get that permission without bringing them into the world.
Right. Exactly. Just like I mean, to my point earlier about like, why am I not allowed to have an opinion on this? Like, or why is my opinion invalidated by virtue of some status I did not choose? I did not choose to be born in the United States or California. I did not choose to be born with fucking what do you call it, Franken beans? I did not.
How'd you
I heard
get
that the other day,
Frank?
and I was like, "What, Franken
How'd you
beans?"
get the beans above the Frank?
I didn't ask for that. I didn't ask to be born with light skin. I didn't ask all of that shit. I got my I hear from, friends and stuff. Oh, you don't understand. It's like, well, my family were like kind of my family, what I know of them, because you have the luxury of having an extended family that I don't, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and your family has a history and a place. Like, I don't really know where I come from. I think I come from a part of Eastern Europe. Like, and then they immigrated here like recently. They weren't like taking like, it's not like we're not like landed gentry or anything in the US.
No.
We don't have some legacy of wealth from our past crimes against Black and Indigenous people. No, we came here, we were poor, we lived in the fucking ghetto in Chicago, fucking got your ass kicked by the cops, got your ass kicked by the Italians or whoever else. Like, it's just fucking bullshit turf wars in the city. Like, it all, all of that. You're like, I didn't choose to have a fucking, alcoholism and all this other stuff in my family. I didn't choose any of that shit. You can say that you're, by status of the color of your skin, you're fucking oppressed, but like, look at like Sasha and Malia Obama. Like, would you say that they carry a fucking like, look at Michelle or Barack Obama. Do they carry a legacy of fucking like long-term fucking like trauma? I mean, maybe. I'm sure there's elements to it. I think Obama wrote something in one of his first books.
Yeah, he talked about his grandmother.
Yeah, and just kind of like struggle of like growing up in law schools, Black man, and this, that, and the other thing. But like, okay, cool. So that's part of who he is. But like, that doesn't mean that his opinion on fucking Black people in Flint just got to drink the water. I don't see a problem with it. Like, does that make his opinion valid because he's also fucking the dark skin? No, it doesn't.
No, it's
completely fucking irrelevant. Go ahead.
Well, and that definitely illustrates the idea that it's more of a class difference in most instances than it is a race difference. Mm-hmm. Like you have poor white people, you have poor Black people, poor brown people everywhere, and most of the time it's about being poor. And that is the unifying thing. And I think the phrase is, they're keeping us fighting a race war to stop us from fighting a class war.
No, that's 100%. And any revolutionary thinker, no matter the color of their skin, acknowledges that fact. Yeah. Especially you look at like your Malcolm X's and your Fred Hamptons, maybe Malcolm X less so, but like you look at a lot of like Black revolutionary leaders and like they straight up acknowledge like, no, this is a class war, and the whole reason you got us fucking hating on each other is so that like we're distracted.
We don't come after you.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole like origins of, as I understand them, the whole origins of like white supremacy as we know it. Like, well, it's all about enforcing all these basically servants or wage slaves or whatever of white people, or even indentured servants, right? White indentured servants, like basically being like, well, or as the Bob Dylan line is like, you're better than them. You've been born with white skin. They experience, right? Like, that line, like. And just kind of like feeling like, oh, I'm not on the bottom of the ladder.
I'm literally like one step above the bottom of the ladder. And that's literally all it takes for some people to be satisfied. And that's kind of sad, in my opinion.
Well, I always see a lot with a lot of people and that identify. He's talking about like, why should I identify around kids? And actually in the other clip that we showed of him, which is about the Great Resignation, like he more or less was saying the same thing about work too, like in a roundabout way, where he's like, why do we define ourselves by like what we do? Like,
I'm a dentist, I'm an office worker. Yeah.
Why do we put so much pride into that? And part of it is class distinction. That's why there is such thing as a professional managerial class. Like there's people that put on khakis in a collared shirt every day that feel they're better than someone who's like the guy sweeping the floor in the office building, right? Like,
it's like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I grow poppies, occasionally some lavender.
Exactly.
Throw that out there.
We got one more clip.
We do indeed. This one is from the man, the myth, the legend, Noam Chomsky, back when he was young.
And still out of his mind.
Sadly, just as pertinent today as it was probably 30 years ago. It's true. This is a rewind in time. You know, if you were to make him look less like Karl Marx and more like Noam Chomsky.
Oh, you think he's more like Karl Marx now?
No, his appearance.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Long
the beard
hair,
and the fucking
big beard.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course, 100%. However, his ideologically speaking, he has gone so far towards the shitlib side of the spectrum. It's fucking scary.
Well, we're gonna watch him before that, hopefully.
Yeah, we're gonna watch him when he was still a radical with integrity and not someone who had reached. We're just talking about that class, right? It's fucking poison, and it colonizes your mind, and then you're like, well, I am a respected intellectual, and I have all these people that respect what I say, so I'm going to start telling them that they don't need to fight for the things that they need to make their lives materially better because Orange Man bad. And guess what? Fuck you, Noam. Fucking betrayed the movement, you old fucking hack. Just die. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, he's gonna die.
He will. I wouldn't worry about it. Yeah,
boomers, man. They're just so much luxury. They just can't understand the struggles of people today. But this is when he's older or younger, rather. Go ahead.
Younger, and yes. And so to preface this, basically, I skipped over the part, as you could barely hear it anyway. There is someone asking him a question, and the interviewer is asking about corporations that treat their employees decently, and shouldn't that be an acceptable thing? And here we
go. When he's speaking against the wage system and the employer-employee relationship.
Yeah. Okay. And so someone's saying like, well, what about? I think in this case it's Lotus, which I believe was a financial company back in the day. I think it might exist in some form, but like if you think about the Lotus 1-2-3 software, if you can remember, if you're old like me, you might remember that. Anyway, here we go.
Bottom line, I mean, let's take a really harsh institution that we don't argue about, slavery. Okay, nobody thinks slavery was good, I presume. Nevertheless, everything that you just said could be said about slavery. I mean, if you took a look at the plantation economy, there were masters who were very decent people. They treated the slaves very nicely. In fact, they were treated better than free workers, much better. They were allowed to live their family lives, you know. I mean, they didn't beat them up or anything. But it didn't matter. It was slavery. And maybe some of them, you know, gave money to the church and did all kind of decent things. Probably they did, you know, nice people. But the trouble was the institution. The institution was wrong. It doesn't matter whether you do it nicely or not nicely. People, you know, the idea that a person should be owned is just an intolerable infringement on human rights, whether the person who owns them is nice to them or not. And, you know, in the 19th century, it was widely recognized that the same is true if people are rented. It's an intolerable infringement on people's rights, even if the guy who rents you is nice to you. The question is whether decisions over investment, production, distribution, what happens on the shop floor, conditions of work, all that kind of stuff, whether those decisions should be out of public control. You go back to the 19th century when there was a live, popular, libertarian working class movement, and you will read in the Knights of Labor statement publications that wage slavery is not a lot different from slavery. In fact, if you bother to go back to the origins of democratic thought, you know, you really read the classics of when people claim to be, you know, classical liberals and so on, but you go back and read this stuff, you know, like, say, Wilhelm von Humboldt, who was the inspiration of John Stuart Mill. He says the leading principle of his, you know, the great classical liberal, you know, the origin of the whole business. The leading principle of his thought is that human beings are born to, he said, to inquire and create, and to create under their own initiative. If any work that a person does under outside pressure is inhuman. If a person creates something beautiful under outside orders, we may admire what he does, but we will despise what he is. Well, that's classical liberal thought, you know. They don't tell you that in the Chicago school. But that's classical any more than they tell you what Adam Smith really said, which is very different from what's claimed. But that's classical liberal thought, and it's because it was driven by, you know, concepts of human rights and human dignities, which are seriously infringed by the structure of business operations. even if the guys who run it are nice guys. You can't be a nice guy in certain positions because the institution is not nice. Now, I'm not, I'm not saying let's go out and blow up Lotus, sure. Not at all. I mean, yes, they're among the best ones around. But that doesn't lead us to I think it should not lead us to overlook what's fundamentally wrong with that authoritarian structure.
Okay.
Oh.
What the hell?
They don't hear that. We hear that.
Oh.
Yeah, I switch over and it cuts out the exterior.
Cool. All right. Well, we just watched Noam Chomsky talking about wage labor, and I'm just curious how that made it into our conversation about abortion.
Well, because if you recall, when I first started talking, I was saying how there's a lot of people finally making the connection in between forcing you to have children and forcing you to make workers. And how they're interlinked. And how I'm just happy to see people finally like talking about that in a more robust way. Like I don't recall in the last decade or so hearing too much of people talking about that concept. And now it's in a lot of different places. It's on Instagram, it's on Reddit, it's on Facebook. You have people talking about that concept.
It's an idea that's circulating in popular discourse amongst the lay peoples, not the intellectuals, but people just having a conversation about, well, okay, we've come to this conclusion and decided like the way that the wage labor system works is fucked. Oh, interesting. Let's contextualize this issue about reproduction and reproductive rights within situated within that kind of greater context of this system only exists to exploit labor.
Exactly.
Got you. And that's essentially not having known that this was coming, because I did zero prep for this show. You should have cut me off and been like, yo, let's talk about the slavery. Because I literally said that earlier. I was like, it's not as bad as chattel slavery, but there's not a lot of fucking daylight between the two, really.
Yeah. But it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't know, making workers. Do you want to summarize? Like, we don't even know what the Supreme Court's decision is.
We don't know. We just have the leak. But it's basically, it's going to be a full overturn. There's a lot of talk about like making it a federal ban on abortion. And so like the only refuge will be, possibly the Satanic Temple has been trying to establish bodily autonomy as one of their religious beliefs for a while now. So you could possibly have that escape, but then you're basically forcing people to adopt a religion. It's not really a religion, but basically forcing people to adopt something they might not want to adopt in order to escape a situation that they never should have been put in the first place.
Right. And imagine being in like Georgia and being like, I'm a Satanist. Like, they'd probably fucking burn you at the stake. No joke.
No. Like it would not go well for you, even if you didn't have the child. Your employment prospects might be forever damaged if anyone ever hears about it. And so it basically forces people into a very bad situation regardless. And so for me, that is what I'm more concerned about, is just like, we have had lower birth rates in the past few decades than ever before in the history of the country. And it's led to a lot of improvements, or at least a lot of attempts at improvements for workers. And I don't want to see that stop just because a bunch of people are forced into having children they didn't want to have in the first place. And those kids aren't going to have good lives. Their parents aren't going to treat them well. At best, they tolerate them. At worst, they despise them. Like, why do you want to force that on people and on children? And this is from like groups that claim to care about children, the children this, the children that. And it's like, you don't give a shit about the children, man. The moment they come out of the womb, you stop caring for them. You don't make sure, like, there are
defund their schools,
defund the schools, make sure they don't get their breakfast lunches, and things like that. Not only during the summer breaks, but they don't even necessarily get them during, school hours. Like, Fresno's kind of interesting in that they've made it available for all students in all districts, where you can get a free breakfast and a free lunch. You just have to show up on time. And they centralized the making of the food, and so a lot of times by the time it gets to the student, a warm meal is cold. It's not necessarily good anymore, and so it's like you're doing your best, but your best ain't good enough, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah,
you're right. Yeah.
No healthcare, nothing like that. Like it's up to the parents to find ways to make sure that the kids are like have nutritious food, have clothes, have a roof over their heads. But then you got these people, the same people that will tell you like, I care about children and I want to make sure children are born. Like the moment they're born, they're just like, I don't give a shit about you because you're not the same color as me, or you don't go to the same church as me, or whatever. And it's just like, man, fuck you guys so hard. Like,
well, yeah, and a lot of people have the birth rate has been slowing, and there's a couple of reasons for that. There's a concept in demography called or demographic transition, but basically, like, based on if you're a developed country, your birth rate is low, but also your death rate is low.
Right.
If you're in the middle, like where you've implemented like sanitation and basic medicine, immunization, all that thing, then your death rate has gone down, but your birth rate's still real high, right?
Yeah.
And then in the first category, in tier 1 or whatever, it's your birth rate is high, but your death rate is also high.
Right.
And so the demographic transition is when your death rate drops, but your birth rate's still high, and populations explode until you get to the point where your births are low and your deaths are low. And so like that's just a concept for like developing nations, and why you see these like various population trends, and generally it has to do with industrializing or modernizing or however you would want to call it, and where you have fewer premature deaths, but your birth rates are still quite high. And really, like, there's this book called Project Drawdown, and anybody can look it up. Maybe if it's not too much trouble, you can drop it in the. Actually, no, fuck that. We're gonna do a whole episode where we just talk about Project Drawdown, because we can go item by item, and there's not a lot of thinking to it because we can just have a free form. So I've already planned our next episode. But anyway, in Project Drawdown, if you take economic opportunities for women and girls, and access to reproductive health, and that does not mean necessarily abortion. That means like birth control,
right,
and condoms and other means of preventing, that have been in use. Abortifacients like have literally been in use since the dawn of fucking time. Like as soon as human beings like became conscious, like
lambskin condoms,
but also like various herbs that would basically like they're called. There's a class called abortifacients. That's what the medicines or the compounds are called. And that's
Rachel
what
and I were talking about that earlier. Yeah,
I mean it's been in use for fucking ever. I mean, dude, like prostitution is like the oldest profession in the world. Some say
abortifacients are the oldest.
And yeah, how do you do that? I mean, you guess you have a lot of bastard kids, but like also at the same time, you probably were like fucking douching with the juice of whatever plant it was or whatever afterwards, right? Yeah, right. Using spermicides or whatever, right? Like, so it means of reproductive health and providing economic opportunities for women and girls are like to combined better than anything else we can do to address global carbon emissions.
I've absolutely heard this. I absolutely.
You've heard that we just need to like make sure that we have family planning services.
Yeah, just basically educate women, get them access to family planning services. Yeah, give them economic opportunities. Yeah, I've heard this. I've watched several videos about it, and it's just like this is the cheapest way you can do all the shit we want to do.
Yeah, and so like also situate what's happening in the United States in that fucking context, dude. Because like not only is it like, oh, we need more workers because like with COVID and with these people deciding this and all these other kinds of like technological changes, like it's becoming harder to extract, like labor is able to assert its agency and demand higher wages. And we don't want that. So we need more people because more people fighting for fewer jobs means lower wages.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
And land, labor, capital. Labor is like one of the pillars of fucking of capitalist production, right? Like, so not only in that context, but also in the context of like, for whatever right-wing ideology in this fucking country is just a big fuck you to our future. Like with climate change, like we need more people. Well, more people that are like living in fucking poverty and scraping, because like we can't have more people that live a middle-class American lifestyle.
Right.
Like, and it's just all part of this delusion that we just want things to be the way they are forever, completely ignoring the fact that, like, look across even just the last 200 years, let alone the last 10,000 years of human history, and all you see is fucking systems failing.
Yeah.
So let's wrap our give that motherfucker a bear hug and ride that shit, dude. Like,
ride it off the cliff. No, bear hug.
Yeah,
you both jump off the cliff.
That motherfucker.
Yeah. A
Hold
good
my
website.
Hand, Zach. Hold my hand.
No, Steve. No, we're not going to go off the cliff. A good website I became aware of a while ago. Did do a TED Talk. I know TED Talk. But it's gapminder.org, and it basically shows like wealth gaps per country,
interesting,
spread out over a period of about 200 years, and you can watch how basically like a lot of the third world, basically starts off very low, but then they like work their way up really rapidly. And then you can watch the US as it kind of like fluctuates all the fuck over the place and ends up like diving down most recently, as like, billionaires take up most of the wealth of the country. And your average citizen is just like, yeah, I have air conditioning and a cell phone, but like, I don't eat nutritious food and I don't have like hobbies. I
live in an inhospitable environment where I can't walk a half a mile outside in the sun because there's no fucking trees.
Yeah, or
miles of parking lot or whatever.
Or I'm a person of color and they moved in a waste yard into a vacant lot because they could afford it and nothing stops them from doing it.
Right. Or you're a person of color and you literally can't go for a jog in your own goddamn neighborhood because someone who doesn't live there might assume that you're robbing someone.
That actually happened to Rachel's ex.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah, no. He got stopped for jogging, basically. Jogging while brown.
By the cops or someone else?
No, cops jogging while brown. Yeah.
That's so fucking scary, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Like every time I see anybody of color get pulled over, I'm like, fuck, dude. I mean, I'm concerned about myself. I get pulled over for speeding, and I know I was speeding. I'm still like gripping my wheel, and I'm like, going to, when he says a license and registration, I'm like, I was waiting for you. I'm reaching into my right hip pocket to produce, and this hand will stay on the wheel. And the cop's like, this was a county sheriff. I mean, it was a couple years back. I haven't had a ticket recently, but like, he was like all kind of fucking weird about it. And he was just like, why are you acting so weird? I'm like,
because I don't want to get fucking
reach into my pocket and pull my wallet out.
Yeah.
In front of you, here's my ID. And he's like, why are you acting like that? You're fucking young and white. Like,
last time I got pulled over, like, I didn't know any fucking different. I just knew you were supposed to have your shit ready. So I like went into the glove box, grabbed the registration. I pulled my wallet out of my pocket, and he's like, just so you know, you shouldn't be doing that. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. No,
you need this paperwork. And I'm just like, I guess I'm lucky I'm white, young, cool.
Yeah, if you see you reaching into a fucking glove box, I'm surprised he didn't start putting bullets into the car from where he stood. Like, you cannot. They shouldn't. And not. Have you ever seen The Watchmen, the one on HBO or whatever?
No, Showtime was it any good? No, was it any good?
I started it. I really liked the graphic novel. It's one of the fucking best stories ever told, in my opinion. It's fucking fantastic. To circle back to comic books, fantastic fucking book. And the movie, a lot of critics were really critical of it. Like, a lot of people were like, this is stupid. I liked it. It kind of had like a pulp superhero vibe to it. It was fucking cool. And low budget, right? So it wasn't like big and flashy like the Marvel movies where it's like 30-minute sequences of special effects and shit. It's just like literally people in fucking like really kind of campy, colorful costumes. Anyway, the show is okay. Very different. It's like same universe, but like a lot of different. I couldn't really get into it, honestly. I've only seen the first 4 or 5 episodes, but in the first episode, like, they've literally taken the ability to have access to a lethal weapon away from the police, and there's a box controlled by a computer by dispatch that they have to like call things in and be like, hey, blah, 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 this is what's happening. I need my weapon. And then they'll unlock the weapon. So, but they don't just carry it on their hip. And I thought that was a really fucking interesting concept.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I was like, oh, imagine that. Imagine if you literally had to be like, no, the suspect is armed, blah, 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 blah. Like, I need my weapon. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be really nice. But instead, like, we were like, oh, I'm going to reach. That's why they even saw.
Well,
like,
not only are they armed, but they're first. Oh, yeah, the little scripts.
Well, no, and like visors and other like kind of things that like stash all of your stuff like on the dashboard by the wheel and all that, so you don't have to like reach for anything.
Yeah. I've seen scripts for how to talk to the police, available online, where it's just like, hey, if you are unsure, what to do, here's this script you can have. You can keep it, tucked away here or there, and just, am I being detained? Things like that, where you're just like, I don't know how to interact with you, and I can't interact with you as a human being. So here's a script that I've developed, or here's a script that I, got from the internet. Let's do this. I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, but we're all disposable, right? And so they want more of us so that they can dispose more of us, because that's what the system does.
Absolutely, and pay us all less, and that's the most important thing. Is everyone's getting uppity right now and wants more money, wants a living wage, and that ain't gonna happen. So they're just like, well, let's try to force you into having more children, so that you're more as a parent, you're more desperate. Your children will grow up more desperate because there's more competition, and so you'll be perfectly fine with having low wages. Well, and the funny thing to me is that when it comes to like, oh, there's not enough people to do the jobs, and how about some immigration? If you really want more workers, why don't you just allow people from other countries to come into America? You could pay them less, but you've created a class of people that are so afraid of immigrants, you couldn't possibly float that idea.
So we're in a tough spot because, like, we made you all mad at the Mexicans, but we need cheap workers, so we're just gonna make you have babies.
Exactly, and you're refusing. So have some babies, would you? I don't want to have babies. You're gonna have the fucking babies.
I think there's a lot more to talk about. I wanted to wrap at 7:30, so maybe we can call it now.
Totally fine. Yeah,
but like, this has been like a long-term objective, and it's so full of culture wars, and like I never even got to that because we do talk about politics as much as I try and avoid it.
I didn't get a chance to talk about how the Democrats are just like, oh, look, Roe versus Wade is under threat. Give us some money. We need some money in order to take care of that. Never mind that we've been in control of everything like twice in the past decade. We just need more money.
And that it wouldn't be up to the Supreme Court if they passed a piece of fucking legislation
that they could have done any time in the past decade. Yeah.
And if for whatever reason the Supreme Court overturned the legislation, then you, as the party that's supposed to be for this thing, you fucking call mass protests and shut down state governments and cities across the country until those state legislatures amend the fucking Constitution, because that's how it's supposed to work. But instead, that's what I was talking about. The culture wars is like, I saw headlines for like 2 seconds because when I was logging into here, I opened the browser, and of course I have to use Microsoft Edge. And it just pops up. It's like, oh, you want to see our headlines and all of our fucking, bullshit. But anyway, one of them was like, all of the times that Saturday Night Live cleverly like shouted out Roe v. Wade. And I'm like, this culture war shit has got to fucking stop, because what you just did is you took an entire election cycle that has a bunch of fucking substantive issues like, we haven't been made whole from COVID. The Fed has facilitated the fucking largest upward transfer of wealth in human history. And if it wasn't bad enough that like we literally just had one of those like 10 years ago, 12 years ago, in 2008 was the OG greatest upward transfer. We just had a fucking another one like that surpassed the first one. Inflation's fucking out of control, not because of COVID, but because the fucking the Federal Reserve's been printing money and offering it to free for banks, so the banks can take it at 0% interest and then loan it to you for fucking 6%. They get fucking money for nothing. And when we struggle, our quality of life declines because
our money is worth less day to day.
More to fucking finance. We're being fucking broken. But now they have a whole fucking election cycle. They don't have to address the fact they are responsible that we weren't made whole with fucking COVID. Like, we can't address the fact that like no one can fucking afford housing. Like, no one has fucking healthcare still.
Our elections are coming up
years
next
Bernie
month.
Was like, oh, we're gonna have healthcare, and everybody's like, fuck yeah, I got a raging hard on for Medicare for all. Let's fucking do this. And then they're like, oh, they play obstruction. And now they're like, a whole fucking election cycle. We just get to talk about how women should be able to have abortion. And guess what? There's a bunch of white-haired fucking shitlib motherfuckers that are eating it up. They're flying their Ukrainian flags and talking about Roe v. Wade, and they can ignore the fact that most of this fucking country is being fucking crushed, and the only logical conclusion in my mind is a fucking fascist dictatorship.
One of the bad ones, though, right? Okay.
One of the
they're all but I've absolutely been reading about how, like, oh, funny how it happens that there's a war that we suddenly care about, even though we didn't, for the longest time, and funny how they a bunch of very competent people leaked something right as we're a month away from heading into midterm elections. Funny how that happens. Funny how we're being distracted from anything of substance in order to focus on things that were supposed to have been guaranteed, that should have been guaranteed, that absolutely should have been codified into law years ago. And we're having it hung over our head yet again. And it's like, you know what? Fucking Democratic Party, fuck you. Well, the right is trying to take away, rights. The left is just refusing to put them into law when they have the opportunity.
They're not the left, but yes, I agree.
Oh, sorry. The Democratic Party is refusing to put them into law when they have all the opportunities in the world. And it's just like, I'm fucking sick of both of you. Maybe we just need a civil war. Maybe we need some balkanization to go on. Some Americanization.
Yeah, and let's talk about that too. Do you remember when Barack Obama didn't fight, and the Democrats did not fight to confirm a Supreme Court nomination because then they're like, oh, but then Hillary Clinton can run on this important Supreme Court seat. And people were like, fuck you anyway. Fuck you for fucking playing games. And right now, I haven't heard anybody be like, this is fucking Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton's fault. Because ultimately, he did not fight to fill the seat so that she could fucking, and it's also Ruth Bader Ginsburg's fault, who somehow is a fucking like a saint, and like hipsters are wearing her on fucking t-shirts and shit. A, she was a racist piece of shit, and B, she refused to fucking step down and retire when she could have.
I have heard both of these things. It's just not, but it's just not huge. It is a problem. It's definitely amongst
subreddit.
It's in the corner of a subreddit. Well, a lot of upvotes, but the problem is that you got women power. Like there are so many people, literally dozens, who are subscribed to these ideas, and that's the problem. Is you have a bunch of people that are just like, yeah, I realize what's wrong, but I don't know how to get the message out there. My messaging isn't great, and so I can't be like, hey, we could have had a liberal justice, but they just rolled over. Hey, or a fucking Ruth Bader Ginsburg, could have retired, but she decided to stay on even though she was fucking riddled with cancer or whatever the hell it was. Why did she? Why did she not retire when she had the opportunity? When there was someone who was in her party, and they have parties. Don't listen.
Oh yeah, they absolutely.
Like, they're judges.
It's a political appointment.
No, it's fucking exactly. It's political shit, and so she did some shit, when she was younger and mentally fit and physically fit, but she should have retired when there was someone who agreed with her in power, and instead just rode it out until the day she died, and now we're stuck with bad shit. And it's like, but it wouldn't have made the big difference,
Well, right. Yeah. And to say we need to get a liberal justice. They all fucking serve capital, dude. There's not one person on the court. Probably one of the most important fucking Supreme Court justices in the 20th century was Earl Warren. And he was instrumental in a lot of the civil rights cases and shit. And guess how he got to that point? When he was the governor of California, he was responsible for implementing fucking Order 66, basically, and or I think it's 50, 66 or something shit. No, but basically the internment of the Japanese during World War II.
Right.
And so he felt so fucking bad about that. He's like, holy shit, I've changed my racist ways because I didn't think of it as racist, but I saw the racism in it, and now I'm going to make amends by when I'm on the Supreme Court ruling in favor of civil rights. And that's the last probably person that like kind of actually had some kind of story or growth. Like all of them are just
the story
fucking,
arc.
they're the last one, Coney Barrett, everybody was upset about her. Yeah, because she's a fucking, like, she's a religious fascist.
Yeah,
like she's a Catholic,
she
Catholic,
is. Yeah.
but she's a fucking a Christian fascist.
Yeah,
in
she
a
will not have
different
a story
thread
arc.
beyond the like Protestant evangelicalism thread that like pretty much dominates U.S. Christian fascist movement or whatever. But yeah, everybody's like freaking out about her. She was the only fucking ideologue, right? Like, like Kavanaugh, like everybody's, oh, he's a rapist. It's like, so is fucking Donald Trump, and so is Joe Biden. Like, there's no, and so is Bill Clinton. There's no fucking accountability.
Yeah.
Like, there's none. So, like, don't fucking say Kavanaugh's a fucking rapist. Like it matters to you because half of Congress is like insider trading and like, which is basically like screwing over people that have to like play in the market with no information. Not the same. I'm not equivocating, obviously, but there's plenty of other sexual predators in the fucking in the halls of Congress, right? Like, I mean, fucking Bill Clinton, goddamn it. He was on Epstein's island. Epstein was buddies with all of them. They're all fucking friends, dude. It's one big club. We're not in it. But my point is like, oh my God, she's a monster. Kavanaugh's a monster too. It's like Kavanaugh, like, dude, like he had the credentials for being like a right-wing fucking prick. And like all of his, like when he was in the appellate court, like all of his decisions were on behalf of capital and against labor. And that's what they fucking wanted. Like, say, oh, he's a monster. And they just do all this bullshit where it's just like it's a fucking celebrity cult, and it's fucking gross because like it's the only institution, and I think I might have said this in conversation with you or someone else when Trump took over, and I said, at least we, there's still a Supreme Court, we're still a nation of laws. Like, yeah, he can be a monster, yeah, he can do a lot of damage, but ultimately pardon me, ultimately they're two wings of the same bird, a big fuck you to the rest of us, right?
Yep.
And it wouldn't really matter, and that we still have a system of laws, etc., and so forth. Well, and I said that the Supreme Court, in my eyes, was like the last American political institution that had any, because the media's fucking out, the fucking executive branch is out, the legislature's out. It's like the Supreme Court's the last one that might have any bit of respect or any kind of was able to maintain any kind of like illusion of integrity. Once that's gone, there are no American institutions that are worth fucking fighting to protect or worth even speaking out on behalf of. And that's a scary fucking place to be, dude. When your country is disintegrating and you don't have a single fucking institution that commands even a little tiny bit of respect, that's grounds for some fucking crazy shit, bro.
That's insurrection.
Insurrection.
Mm-hmm.
It all started with an erection.
An insert erection.
And then there was and then we have to have a resurrection, unless you're Buddhist, and then you're like, non-existence is liberty. No, but that's a good way to. Is it really good? I kind of like started.
Yeah.
Ranting.
You've been thinking about that now.
Scratched my throat. Now my eyes are all watering because I'm like,
serious, bro?
But that was a good tear. I was like, let's get off like 12 minutes ago, and then I was like, wait, I'm ranting. Hold on. I always appreciate a good rant. All right, buddy. Let's talk either Project Drawdown next week, or what was the other one that you just floated just a second ago?
American balkanization.
Yeah, that's a big subject, but we can try.
It's been on our list for a while. I think we need to like study really hard for that.
Well, I know my opinion because I've been a big fan of, so my imaginary future is the Confederated Communes of California and Cascadia. Like, it's just a bunch of communes, meaning like very small administrative units that are nested in a democratic way, and we have agency over decisions in our communities, and we collectively manage watersheds together and landscapes. And it's a fantasy, but we can talk about that in detail another day. This has been with Thunderous Applause podcast. Today we talked about abortion. We never really talked much about abortion and or women's reproductive rights much, but we definitely kind of used
we didn't
it as a
intend
springboard.
Exactly.
because we're the most qualified people probably on the internet on that issue.
To not talk about that.
To not talk about that. Hence why the comic books and the Magic Gathering, of course. And so we talked about those things. As always, you can find all the clips that we showed, plus additional resources we didn't get to, in the description box, right down there by the like, subscribe, and notification bell.
They're all in a row. You just
they're all in a row. It's like
so quick.
All right,
so quick. 3 clicks, you're good.
And then with that, I think we bid you adieu. We need a good sign-off statement. Let's work on that.
With thunderous
applause. Oh yeah. What is it?
You know the name of the channel.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. When at the end of American Empire, democracy dies.
With thunderous applause.
Yeah. Need some like rain and thunder effects or some shit.
Oh my god, we should
get some clips of like old black and white photos of like Nazi Germany and shit. Like just like play that in the background. Oh, it's marked Nazi man.
No one will even notice. They'll just be like, "Yeah, woo, people are applauding." I agree with it. I'm gonna stop the stream now.
All right. See you later, everybody. Peace.
Later, everyone.
Bye.